So one of the questions that we got in our Udemy course is basically how do we use Google Sheet to copy paste data. I rephrased the question because the question is about a Figma plugin which is called Google Sheet Sync, and for example we have like an Excel data or we have some content. How do we sync it to our instances in Figma? So as you can see here, if I scroll down, we have a sidebar, and this sidebar is using real data. Here we have some Amazon component. If I go to basically the prototype here on the left hand side, you see that we have a sidebar. So how do we basically link the data using Google Sheet Sync? What we have to do first is making sure our layer instances are named properly. Here, if I click on my instance, in this example, we have the sidebar item, and that is a variant set. If I click on any of the variants, it really doesn't matter. What matters is the naming of the text layers. Here the text layer is renamed hashtag sidebar. Again, the hashtag is very important, is because the Google Sheet plugin looks for the hashtag, and then again this name doesn't really matter, but what really matters is you exactly name this according to your Google Sheet column header, which means again if I rename this to hashtag sidebar, I have to go to Google Sheet and rename that to sidebar. Again, I have to omit the hashtag on Google Sheet side. I just have to rename the Google Sheet column header to sidebar. However, to Figma, I have to make sure I add the hashtag to the layer name. Again, let's go ahead and visit Google Sheet. Here I just opened a Google Sheet, and what I have to do is making sure my first column is renamed sidebar. And in this example, what you can do is, if you have an Excel, here I have an Excel, the easiest way is basically when you have an Excel data, Control or Command A, copy everything, and then you basically navigate back to your Google Sheet, click on your first cell, Control or Command V, and you basically paste your data. And if you take a look at the column C here, the column C, we have something called sidebar. Again, if I go here, I have my sidebar name as all lowercase. So here I have to make sure I add the hashtag, and then once I add the hashtag, I rename this sidebar with all lowercase letters. And if I go back here, you see I have my column C, the first header is renamed sidebar without the hashtag. And if you take a look at the basically other columns, if you have two names like account list, I rename it according to camel case. I don't add any space or dashes, I just write account and then capital L list, and I have to make sure again this is exactly the same one in my Figma side. In this example, I don't need any of them, so I can simply basically highlight and then just delete them because I don't need any of them, and then also highlight, delete them. I only need this sidebar, so what I can do is basically copy this, paste this here, and basically delete everything. So here what matters to me is this sidebar that I have. Again, the name is sidebar all lowercase, and once I have all my data, what I can do is click on share, and then here I have to make sure it's not restricted, so it's exactly anyone with this link. Once I update that, and again I have to make sure that this is editor, so basically I have basically a full permission enabled. And once I enable all the permission, I have to copy the link. Again, once I copy the link and I make it editor permission, and basically anyone with this link can have full access, I would copy the link, and then once the link is copied, I would go back to my Amazon, and then in this example what I would do is I would just bring the sidebar out. Here I would basically click on detach instance. So what I can do is I can click on the sidebar here, I can unclip it to see the rest of the list, and then this sidebar, you see, since I detached it, I can click on the items, and then once I have the items, I can click basically return on my keyboard, 3 dots, reset all the changes. So basically we're back at square one, which is all selection. And what you have to do right now, if you want to link it again to the, let me just go back to the Google Sheet, we have the sidebar and you want to link it to all the items. Once you copy the link, you would click on the frame, and then you would run the Google Sheet Sync plugin. And then once you run that, you have to make sure you select the appropriate selection. If you do entire document, that's actually going to replace everything that has the same name. In this example, we don't want that. We don't want the page as well. We only want the selection because we are selecting this sidebar instance. So here we have the first one, update the current selection, and then once we have this, we would just basically delete the link and copy paste our link that we have, and then we would just click on fetch and sync. And then as soon as we do that, here we see again on the left hand side we are linking our Google Sheet Sync with the text instances in Figma. So again, the key takeaway is if I go ahead, if I basically Command Z that, and if I go ahead in my selection, and then here let me collapse all the layers, and then if I go here and then have sidebar with an extra R, that's basically the name of it. If I come and try to do the Google Sheet Sync, and paste it, current selection, fetch and sync, you see nothing happens. And as I mentioned, I just added one extra R by mistake. It's really case sensitive. You have to make sure you have all lowercase, and then same thing if I go to my Google Sheet, my first column has to be all lowercase, and on top of that, if I go back to Figma, it has to have a hashtag in the beginning of the layer name.